Welcome back to the channel. This is the place where we explore software development, we dive into exciting technologies, and learn how to build amazing projects together. By the way, if you're new here, I'd love to have you join this growing community of passionate developers. Just hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on the latest tutorials, tips, and coding fun. It is free and it really helps support this channel. Alright, let's dive straight into today's session. In this video, our aim is to talk about exceptions. Right? Let us use a car as an analogy in this case. When you're driving a car, a lot of things can actually go wrong, right? You could be out of gas, you could have flat tire, you could have overheating engines, right? Now, instead of letting the car crash when something goes wrong, the car shows you a warning or like a warning light on the dashboard, and then so you can actually fix the issue, right? So the same way in programming, things can go wrong at any point in time. But rather than the application going down and shutting down on you, there are different things that you can actually do, which is the exception, right? You can handle the exception such that it returns something to tell you that there's an error or there's an issue somewhere. Now, say for example, you have a form, a search engine, for example, right? And then you're typing, you want to search for a particular name of a person. And then you type in the name of a person. What happens if that name of that person is not available in the database or behind the scene? The application would not shut down, but it will return something to you and tell you, oh, that name is not available in my memory or in my database, right? So there are different types of exceptions, right? You have the normal regular exception. Of course, you could use the try catch and all other ways you could do, right? So you have, in Java, we have exceptions like null pointer exceptions. You have illegal argument exception. And by the way, null pointer exception simply means when something is null and we try to use it, it is not there and you're trying to use it. And an illegal argument exception means when we pass bad inputs to a method, for example. But these exceptions are too general. The null pointer exception and the illegal exceptions are general. That's where functional exception comes into play. What we want to do is we want to customize our error such that it gives us what we want as a pointer to different errors. All right. So custom exceptions or custom messages like user not found, like you want to handle proper HTTP response instead of the normal ugly, I call it ugly error pages that Spring or Java gives to you. So let's get into the code implementation. So I have created a project, a new project, and there is nothing in it at the moment. And for those of you that do not know how to create a project, you could check the previous videos. I already created some videos on how to create this project. And of course, it's a Spring Boot project and it uses Maven. I also have those explanations in the previous videos, all right? So in this project, I only have about 4 dependencies. I have the Spring Web, I have the Apache Commons, and I have Lombok. You will see where we need them now. And I also have the test, right? So, all right, let's get right into it. The first thing we want to do is we want to create, let's just create a package so we make things neat. And let's just call it entity or object, whatever you want to call it, right? So here, I want to create a user object, for example. Okay. So for this user object, if you remember, we had the Lombok. So we could actually use the data. Data will give us the setters and getters. Of course, you can do this any other way you want to do this. All right. But we want to make this as simple and as fast as it could be. And then you understand how functional exceptions work. All right. So we already have the annotation at data. We're not using database in this case. All right. We also want to use the @all_arg constructor. And what does that do? It creates a constructor with all the fields. Again, if you don't know what a constructor is, you could check the previous video. And then we want to also add no_arg constructors. Of course, the reverse of it. It creates an empty constructor. Okay. So let's just create some fields here. Let's see, private, let's create a string. And then we want to create first name. Let's do a first name. That works. Let's create another one, last name. That works. Let's also create another one. Email works. Let's create phone number. All right. Phone number, good. And then let's just add one more here. Private, let's make a string. user ID. Awesome. So we already have our user object here. So which means whenever we return this object, it comes back with the user ID, the first name, the last name, the email, and the phone number. That's simple enough, right? Okay. So now let's go into simple implementation. So let's just go into let's create another package and create our service package. All right, services. Let's just rename that. Rename it services. Good. All right. In the service, we want to just create a user service. You can name this whatever you want. And again, we want to use the annotation at service. Simple enough. So in this case, we're not using a database, right? Let's just try to load our data on startup so we have a data to work with, all right? So how do you do that? You could just create a post constructor, all right? And then we'll just create a public void. And then let's just call it load users. That works, all right? So here, let's create a list. Let's just create a list. Let's make it a private list. And then we'll make it the list of our user object. So it's user object. Okay. Let's initialize it. New array list. Awesome. All right. So from here, it's at post construct. Good. Okay, so now let's add data into our list. So we just want to add new user object. All right. So what's the first thing? The first thing is the username. User ID. So let's say our user ID is U1. Or let's do 001, right? And then comma, then the first name should be the next one. Let's see. Let's just use John. And then last name will be, say, Doe, for example. And then let's just, the next one would be an email. Yep. So let's say john.doe@abc.com. Should be at. All right, and the last one is what? You have the email. Okay, the phone number. So let's just put the phone number. And the phone number, let's just put sample phone number 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 0. That's fine. Okay, so again, sample data. Let me just drag this so we see what we're working with. All right, that's a sample data. Let's just add one more. I could just duplicate this and do 02 and then do say Jane. Let's just do Jane Doe. All right, so Jane Doe at CBA, say for example. Okay, and then let's just change the email. The phone number. So we can do 1 2 3 and random phone numbers, right? Now this looks good. We can make do with just 2 data. If you want more, you could do that. Now, just so we know that this loads at the beginning, as soon as we start our application, let's just put maybe a log somewhere here. Let me see if we can just use a log. All right, let's just add a log here and say log.info, for example, information. Let's say user data loaded, right? That works. All right, so let's just test this first. Let's test this before we go on. Okay, so we have an error somewhere. It says constructor cannot be applied to a given type, no argument. So let's go back and look at what the problem might be. Okay, everything looks good here. Oh, there's a spelling error here first, but that's not the problem anyways. So sometimes Lombok could be acting weird, and so because of that, like sometimes like to generate my stuff. Okay, so let's just generate it manually. Let's just do generate. So we could generate getters and setters. Okay, so let's generate getters and setters, and then we select all. First up, that's just going to give you more code, more lines of code. That's just the problem. And then let's just generate constructors. Yep, so we generate our constructors, and there you go. Okay, so let's go back to the code, and now we have our constructors. First name, everything seems good. Let's try again. All right, so now we're saying there is a symbol. We cannot find the symbol log. Oh, okay. This one. I'm thinking this is the error now. Okay. You know what? Let's just print it rather than using log. If it's gonna give us issues, I just want to do this in as fast as we can, so we can just do user data loaded. Okay, that'll work. Okay, good. So it's running, and then you see user data loaded, which means we can actually write our logic at this moment, and then we should be able to get our data back. All right, so let's go on. Let's just do let's find our data. Let's just write a simple logic that just returns our data when we find it, right? And so how do you do that? Let's just create a something public. Let's return an optional, and then we want to return just one. Let's return user object, just the object, and then let's find by this user ID. Let's use the user ID to find it. Find by user ID. Awesome. And then of course it's going to accept a parameter at this time, and that's string user ID. Good. And then what do we want to do here, right? Why do we have error here? User object. Oh, the optional is what the problem is. So let's use this. Okay. All right. So now we want to search by user ID, right? And then when the user ID is not there, again, do not forget our aim for this video is to make sure that we handle our exceptions very well using the functional exceptions, right? So we want to return something, especially when that particular user is not in our data, right? Let's just try the simple logic here, and then in the controller would tend to like handle that particular exception. So here we just want to do a return. Let's just do a return, and then we want to do user, which is our users. We want to stream to our users. Let me see if this will give me what I want. So that should be users dot stream dot filter dot user dot get id dot equals to user id. Good. Find first, which this will work. This will work. Simple. So this is what we want to do. So what we're doing is we're just looping through this particular data, and then if it's there, just find it and return it. That's what this is doing. All right. So now let's go back into let's create another package, and let's call that package controller. Okay. And then we want to create our user controller. Okay. And of course, from the previous classes, the first thing you want to do is your at-rest controller annotation. Okay. So again, we're just going to make this as simple as we can. And then we want to bring in, we want to inject our user service, and we just call that user service. Okay. And user service. All right. So let's do our get operation here. Okay. So at get mapping, that's what we want to do. And then we can do this different ways. We can use a request parameter, we can use a path variable, but in this case, let's just use a path variable, right? So we just want to do / say /id / let's do user ID. That's fine. Okay, not bad. Okay, public. Then we want to do user object. We want to return the user object, and then we want to call it the get user by ID. This works, but it's not an integer. It is a string in our case. Okay, so now we want to call that particular user service we just created, this one that returns that particular object. We just call it, and then we just do a return user service dot find by, right? Then want to pass in our user ID, the same user ID that we want to use to search, and then we want to, what happens if it's not there, right? Or else we want to just use the or else true, and that's because we're using optionals, right? So let's just decide what happens if that particular user is not in the database. Okay, let's do this. There are simpler ways you could do this. Okay, maybe we could just use an if statement. You could use an if statement, but this is straightforward, right? But if you have questions about all this, just let me know in the comment section and I'll take my time to explain this. But this arrow is simply known as the lambda sign, right? If this particular user is not in our data, what happens? This is where the functional exception comes into play, okay? Now, we're supposed to throw an exception, right? Maybe, for example, user not found or something, okay? So now let us create an exception package. Let's create a package called exceptions. Now, in these exceptions, we're going to create multiple things. One of them is, let's just create the functional error code. Let's call it error code. Okay. Let's create another class. We want to create our global exception handler. I would explain everything. Okay. And then we want to create one of the anticipated exceptions. So let's just create one of them. Say user not found, for example, right? User not found exception. Okay. And then one more thing. Let's create our functional exception itself. Good. Now let's take them one by one. So let's start with the functional error code. All right. So functional error code is just like your dashboard, right? The warning system. And of course, from my explanation before, is assume you have a car and that car has a flat tire or something. The dashboard gives you that signal instead of just crashing the car, right? So let's take the functional error code as that particular dashboard that shows you what's going on. All right. So let's just write the implementation step by step. All right. At getter is the first thing I want to do. And what that does is simply create getter methods such that we are able to access this particular code elsewhere at any point in time. So just want to use at required argument constructors, and this ensures that our error codes are always set. That's what that does. Now this class needs to be an enum, not a class. And what is an enum, right? Enum are fixed list of errors, like the warning lights that I said. Like the warning light, you have the check engine lights, the tires, and all those lights. So they're fixed. They're just fixed. That's what enums are. All right. So in this case, we want to create some enum. Say we want to create a bad request, for example. Let's just choose bad request. And then we want to set maybe an error of say 1. All right, a code of 1, and then we want to set maybe HTTP bad request. This works. Okay, it's worked for me. And then we want to also set, let's give it a string, bad request. All right, you get an error because we haven't set anything here. So let's just format it and give it some variables in. So we could just do private final. Let's make it final string. Let's do code, for example, or just name it error code, doesn't really matter. Okay, and let's also set private. Let's just do private. Yeah, we can do HTTP status too. Then let's just do what the message will look like. String error message. Yep, this works too. Error message, or we'll just do error template. Anyone? Error message, which is okay. Okay. Now, let's just create that functional error code and see how this formats. Right? Let's create a constructor. Constructor here, error code. Good. And then what we want to put in is we want to, of course, this works. Now this is a string. You know what? Because we have one here, let's make it integer. Let's make it integer. It's okay. Error code, error code. I think every other thing looks good. Okay. And string. Okay. All right. So here we want to set the constructors, and we want to say this dot error code. Oh no, this is wrong. All right, it has to be error code. Okay, int this dot error code equals. Let's just do a format. Let's format it, and let's just say what that error code will look like. Okay, let's just format it. So I want to format it such a way that when you pass in, say for example 1, it should come back with 001 or 002 and the likes like that, right? So I can do that by using the modulus and then 03D. So that helps me to like format whatever my code is and give me that 3 digits. Okay, error code. Good. So let me import this. Let's just import that static sync format. Yep, that works. All right, the next one would be HTTP status. That works. And then the next one is the error message. Good. You know what? Since we are we're converting this, we're formatting this, let's change this back to string. It doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want with it. All right. So let's just change this back to string. No, this will be integer because we'll be passing it integer and then we'll format it into strings. That works too. Yeah, that works. We can leave it this way. Okay. Now, do we have any error? We can just have more. Let's just have more here. Let's have more. Not found. Do not. Not found. Good. So user not found. This works. All right, these two, I think we can make do with this too. All right, which is good. So the next thing we want to do, again, as I said earlier, let's just explain this. We created an enum class, right? What is an enum? They're static. Assuming you have a dashboard, those lights are static. They never change. If you have a flat tire, the lights remain the same as flat tire. The flat tire lights does not change to something else, all right? If you have a check engine light, the check engine lights remains the same. It doesn't change. So they're static. That's what enums are, right? So we created enums of bad request and not found. So in the case of our application, we're creating exceptions or errors that we are foreseeing will probably be happening or occurring. And so we create the custom for that. And then we just created a constructor. And why I created constructor is because I want to format what my error code would look like, right? I just don't want to return 1, 2, 3. I want to make sure I'm converting this into, say, for example, if my, you know what, let me just add a comment here. So I'm doing something like convert, say, for example, error code 1. I want to convert it to, say, 001. So if you look at it, I'm accepting an integer, right? But I'm giving out a string. Okay. So it's formatting that integer into string. That's what I'm doing here at the moment. All right. Or maybe if you have 2, it changes to 002. Okay. That's straightforward. If you have any question, please leave your question in the comment section and I'll be able to answer them. Okay. All right. So let's move on to the functional exception, right? Now here, the functional exception here acts like an emergency alarm in the car, right? What it does, it throws the error when something goes wrong. Like it uses the functional code, right? So again, let's use the analogy of the car, right? When something is wrong with the car, you see that light, but something triggers that light. So that thing that triggers that light is the functional exception, all right? In most cases, it might be one of the board in the car. So let's assume that this is the board in that car that tells the dashboard what light to turn on when there's a flat tire, or what light to turn on when you have a low gas tank, all right? So that is what this is doing. And here, what we want to do is, again, we want to use our @getter, and then we want to extend. Let's just extend. I don't want to use exceptions, so we want to use runtime exception. Okay, and then let's just create a private static. Let's do a static long. Well, no, this works. What this does is help us to track our errors, and then we want to bring in our functional error code, the one we created earlier, right? Private final. Let's make it final. Then functional error code. Okay. So then error code. Good. And then we create a constructor for this. We had it into a constructor. Now let us just create what our error messages would look like. Now we can always change this. Let's just change this and add. Let's just add a super to it. Let's do a super. Let's make it an argument. That works. All right, so we can add our super here, and then we want to format what our message will look like. Okay. All right, let's just create our method for formatting the message. Okay. So private format message. Okay. It should be a static string. Let's just make a static string. Okay, good. And what does this accept? This would accept the message template we already created in our functional error code, and then it will also accept the arguments. All right, so let's just push in the argument. So message, let's do message, issues, and then string our argument. Good. All right, so what do we want to do here? We want to return, our aim is to return the argument if the argument is greater than 0, right? What we want to do is we want to replace something in the message. Okay, so let's just do .length is greater than 0. If it is, then what we want to do is we want to do a message dot, then we want to join our error with our message template. Okay, so let's just do that. String dot join. Okay, we had our delimiter, and then we do argument. We want to pass in our arguments, but if not, we just want to return our message. Okay, that's all we need to do here. This looks good. And now we can format our message. Good. And then we pass in our error code dot get message. So we already have our message. Let's see. Let's go back here. So we have our message. Good. So that's what we're getting. And that's the job of this getter, so that we're able to get it from another place. All right. So where are we? We're in the, yep, here. So now we're passing our error code or error message, and then we're passing in our argument. And that's it for this one. Again, this serves as our board for checking, for sending signals to the dashboard on what error to display. Okay. So the next thing we want to do is we want to go into our handler. Now the handler itself is just like, a mechanic, right? Let me use that word, a mechanic. It catches that error and tries to fix them. in most cases, well, it really does not fix them. It just gives you an idea of, okay, this is what is going on, and then just fixes it into what you want, right? So it fixes it and returns something that you want. And now, for the global exception handler, you would need an annotation of the REST controller advice, all right? So let's just do that. REST controller advice, good. All right. And what it does is it automatically catches errors in the project. That's what REST controller advice does. All right. So we want to undo what's that error and how it returns that error. So for example, we want to do exception handler. Let's just use the annotation at exception handler, and then we'll pass in that functional exception. All right. That class of it, we want to use that. Okay. This simply means, okay, we are catching the functional exception errors. That's what this means. Okay. And then we create a public. Let's create a public method that returns a response entity. In this case, we do not want to return a string. Let's just return a map. Okay. Here we want to return a map of string and object, which works. Okay, good. And then it accepts again functional exceptions, which is good. All right. So what do we want to do? Let's create a map. Let's just create a map that actually holds our errors and our responses. Okay. So here, what do we want to put in it? We want to put response. Let's do body.put message. Yeah, we could do that message. Then you get the message, which is good. And we also want to do body.put. Let's put timestamp. You know what? Let's put timestamp first. Timestamp. Then we want to do time stamp. Okay. Let's just make it normal common case. And then we can do local data time. That now, right? Or if you want to do zone time, it doesn't really matter. Date time now, which is good. Good. What else can we add? We can add HTTP status, right? You know what? Let's add the message body.put. So we do message. Oh, we already had the message. Okay. What else? What else? Code. Yeah, code. And then we can just get the code. Yeah, this works. So we can do code .get error code .get code. Yeah, that works. All right. So then we can add the status. Yep. Body.put, and it has status. Okay. And then we can do the get error code .get HTTP status, and let's just get the value. Okay. Now let's just return this. Return new response entity. Then we want to return our body, and then we want to return let's just get the error code and HTTP status. HTTP state. Okay, so there's an error somewhere. It's saying object and a returning object. Okay, so that's the error here, and then that's it. This works. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is let's now go back into our controller, right? Remember, we're supposed to do this in our controller, but let's go back to our service class and just try to use it in our service class instead, rather than let's just have all the logic in one spot. So we can do that. We want to find first, and if it doesn't find it, what do you want to do? You want to, or else, right? Or else you want to throw something. So let's just throw something here. Okay. We want to do new functional exceptions. So now what do we want to do? Since we're looking for a user, and if that user is not found, let's just look for an error code. Functional error code of 2. Okay, let's just do functional error code not found. Yeah, or let's see if we have another one there. User not found, so we can do not found, which is fine. All right, and then we want to pass in a message, user with ID it's a string, so we can concatenate user ID space not found. Awesome. And then we can, of course, this would be an error because we're trying to return, we've changed this return type, and then we just change it to only user object, and that should be fine. Now the error is fixed. Okay, so let's now go back into our controller. So in our controller, all we need to do is we don't have to do this anymore because we already handled it in the service class, right? So this looks pretty much good for me, and so we can test this now. But before we test, let's just do a rundown of what we've done so far, right? Again, our aim for this particular video is to make sure we understand what functional error code is. And using a car as our analogy, a car could have issues, right? You could have a flat tire, you could have low gas, you could have different kind, low battery, maybe anything for a car, right? But the car does not crash immediately. It gives you a sign on the dashboard. That sign on the dashboard, we created something for it, which is called the functional error code. Now, functional error code that we've created here is an enum. And what is an enum from my last statement? An enum is static. So, for example, again, using our car as an analogy, when you're low on gas, the check engine does not turn on. It's the gas signal that turns on. So it is static. When the tire is low, it's the tire lights that turns on, not the gas light, all right? So it is static. So we are assuming that in our case for this particular application, we're assuming that we will face an issue with no user found or user not found, or we would face an issue with bad request, right? So we created different functional error code for this. As soon as we get any of this, just these are the error codes we want to see, okay? And then we formatted what the error code here would look like. So for example, when you do a 1, all right, the error code is number 1 here, it converts this particular integer into a string by formatting using the string format, right? And then we went back into creating an object. We created an object with the user ID, the first name, last name, email, and phone number. And of course, we created the constructors, the getters, and setters, okay? And we can use this later in the code. And then because we're not using a database, what we've done so far is create a mock data. If you look at this, we created the mock data using the post construct. And then we added that data into a list. And whenever you start up this application, you're supposed to get this data. This data will load automatically. And you'll be able to find, and then we created a method to find by user ID. Okay, simple enough. We're just making it simple enough. And when the user is not there, we then call to our engine from the car, or that board in the car that signals to your dashboard, right? Which is the functional exception. Again, when you have a low gas in the car, that dashboard turns on, right? The light on that dashboard turns on, but something tells it when to turn on. In our case, it is a functional exception. The functional exception then calls that light and tells that light to turn on, that you have a low tire pressure or a low gas tank. All right, so that's what we have here. That's why we have this functional exception. Okay, in the service, let's go back to the service. When that user is not found, then you now throw that particular functional exception, and then you tell it what to do. In our case, the user is not found. All right, I hope that is clear enough. From here, we then call to our controller, and our controller is what passes that HTTP request from, in our case, we'll be using the Postman. We pass down from Postman to using the path variable, and then we send it to our user service. Okay, let's now test this. Okay, let's start this. All right, to test this, I already have my Postman. All right, the data has been loaded. Let's try a Postman. Let's create a new, okay, new HTTP request. Again, our port is 8080, which is good. Okay, so we have HTTP localhost 8080. Okay, and what is our endpoint? Let's go back there to check. So we have ID, and then we can pass in whatever ID we're looking for, correct? So in this case, we have id slash, let's just look for an id that is in our method, or our data rather. So you have this id is u001, so let's just do that. id u001, paste that and search. So we have an id with u001. It's returning the data, right? But what if it's not there? Correct? So if it is not there, we're expecting to see our not found, correct? Which is the exception we've created, right? So let's just say id 002 is there, right? 002 is there. We have Jane Doe, and 001 should be John Doe, right? Which is correct at the moment, okay? So what if we have 12? We don't have 12, right? See, we are able to tell our logic what kind of exception to throw. I hope I've been able to explain what functional exceptions are and the exception handling, custom exception handling itself in this particular video. Again, if you have any questions, just drop your questions in the comment section and I will attend to them accordingly. Once again, I'm super thrilled to be your instructor on this journey towards building excellence. Again, please subscribe if you have not subscribed, leave your comments, click the notification button to stay updated with our new videos, and most importantly, please share with your friends. And I'll see you in the next video.